We are live.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Evans. Colleagues, good morning. I hope each and every one of you as well. We are so glad to have you join us as we reconvene our conversation focused on the budget and compensation model as we continue this journey of trying to offer a recommendation to the State Board of Education, and then ultimately we hope to the General Assembly, where we can look at and reconsider the way we go about paying our K-12 classroom teachers. Since the last time we were together, which would have been back in November, December, if I remember correctly, the proposed model that we've shared in terms of budget and compensation has been presented to a couple of different audiences. I know Best NC had an event back in November, I think it was in early December, and elements of the model was presented at that time. I know Dr. Fleming presented pieces of the model at a conference in Raleigh or Durham, I believe, back in late November. Patrick Miller, the chair of PEPSC, and Dr. Tomberlin presented the model in its totality to the State Board of Education. So we've had opportunities to receive some feedback and input from a number of different people. Dr. Evans sent you an email with some of that feedback attached, where you got feedback from the North Carolina Association for Colleges of Teacher Educators in CACTE, and then you got some feedback from classroom teachers across the state. So we wanted to spend today really opening up the conversation so that we can talk about the feedback that we received, and we can start thinking futuristically about how we move forward, what our realistic next steps are with respect to the budget and compensation model, factoring in some of the feedback that we received, but also circling back to some of those variables that we may not have spent enough time considering. We raised them, things like national board, how does that factor into this process and so forth. So we're going to circle back and lift up some of those pieces that we may not have had time to entertain before we went on pause, while at the same time factoring in some of the feedback that we're receiving from individuals from across the state. So that's the purpose of today's conversation. It really is intended to be an open dialogue. It's a free-flowing discussion. I will attempt to structure the conversation as best we can, so we're not all over the place at random times, so we can kind of circle in and focus on a topic at a time, so we can go deeper into that space and make notes of what we need to consider moving forward. So that's the purpose of our meeting today. That's the purpose of our discussion today. And before we open the floor and kind of dive into the discussion, I do want to say sincerely from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so very much for sticking with us. This is a journey. We knew it from day one when we started this work. And you, of course, have the option to do other things. But we are thankful that you are with us today in our restart of this work, and we look forward to continue to work with you moving forward. So let me pause there. Dr. Fleming, the co-chair, has jumped on, and I wanted to make certain that Dr. Fleming, I provide you some time, sir, to engage our colleagues this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Graham. Good morning, everybody. I apologize for my tardiness. We had a leadership staff meeting, and so it went a little late there, but it's good to have everybody here. It sounds like over the next month or so, a lot of our work, and I don't know what Dr. Graham has covered, but a lot of our work will be focused at the subcommittee level, and I am really looking forward, and I know we're really going to be, if we haven't already dug in, we're really going to be digging in now. So good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. And obviously, I want to pause for a second. Our colleagues from DPI, Dr. Evans, I know you're here. If there's anything you'd like to add, I'm not sure if Andrew or Tom is online. I don't see them. But if there's anything from my colleagues at the DPI level that you'd like to add, feel free to do so.
So Dr. Tomberlin and Dr. Seiberg will be joining a little bit later. We were in a meeting immediately before this. I just want to welcome everyone again to this work, and I appreciate, like Dr. Graham, your commitment to it. I do have the PowerPoint that was sent out to everyone if you need to reference anything during this discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Well, at this point, what I want to do, I don't want to belabor the point. I want us to kind of jump on in and dive in and start having some conversation here. But I would love to hear from you all as committee members, any immediate reactions that you might have to anything that you have heard, anything that you've read, the feedback that you received that Dr. Evans sent out. If there are things that we may not have had time to focus on before the work pause that you want to make certain that you lift back up to our attention. Really want to spend the time today trying to organize the feedback, the responses, and what your thoughts are so we can figure out what the next steps of our work can be so that we can ensure that we're completing this work in a very comprehensive and robust way, but also making certain that we are informed in our recommendations to PEPSC, and then ultimately we hope to the State Board of Education. So I'll be quiet now and I welcome any feedback or any ideas or any commentary.
Good morning. This is Stephen Martin. I have some feedback, maybe some questions as well. I read through what Kim sent out with the, I think she sent us 3 emails with some feedback. Some of that crossed over, I think. Interesting feedback, kind of a mixed bag, it seems, from teacher groups and university groups with some support for the plan, and then a lot of questions about the nitty gritty, which I think, in my opinion, and I'll be the first to say, that this is an overhaul of the compensation system and also kind of the licensure system, which for someone like me that's been in education for over 30 years as a teacher, administrator, district leader, I've known one way. And so, it's hard for me to get outside the box to see the vision for a new way. I like the concept, but I think this has the potential to fall on our face with the details of it. And that's what I see in the feedback. So I do think it's important to talk about some of the details. I'm interested to hear more about, Barry, I think what I heard you say was the national board. How's the national board going to fit in? And I think we've moved away from master's pay, but some of that is in the questions that teachers have is, and master's pay being reinstated. I know that's probably not going to happen, but those are things. A few more questions I might raise would be, is there a certain percentage? How will advanced teacher roles be allotted to districts? Is it by number of positions? Is it by a lump sum of money? And the districts would be able to divvy out how many teachers they would have at each level of compensation. So those are just a few things I would pose to the group, that if we can flesh out the details of this more, and I don't know how long that will take, that it has the potential to be a great plan. But I think as long as it stays in theory, and then if we start putting it in practice, I've heard a lot of HR directors say, who's going to monitor this? How do we know if teachers are effective? How do we know when they move to the next level? Will principals feel pressured to rate teachers higher so they can be in a higher pay category? Those are just a lot of the questions I've heard since the last time we've met.
That's great feedback, Dr. Martin. I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate you raising those different elements, particularly from our HR colleagues in the districts. We obviously want to make certain that we're hearing from them and integrating their concerns into our conversation. So thank you so very much for kicking us off with very specific, pointed types of concerns and inquiries. Others.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, this is Marcy. Good morning, Dr. Graham and everyone.
Good morning.
So I've had a chance to, I did not get, Kim, if you'll update my personal email in this, I didn't get any of the feedback. So haven't had a chance to read that. And, with my transition, I know a lot of things are up in the air. So I'm getting some of your messages, but I didn't get these 3 on the feedback. So Stephen forwarded them to me. Thank you, Stephen. But in conversations with different groups and organizations, there are, and in reading some of, EdNC shared this online on social media. So there's been some feedback on social media that's been interesting as well. And to Stephen's point, I think sharing it in general, the way that it's been shared, without being able to answer a lot of the implementation questions is what's making, I know from my perspective and some other folks' perspectives, a little more antsy about it. So moving in that direction, I think for us is going to be really important. I have concerns about how, if this is for classroom teachers, this is just feedback in general. What about those specialists in our schools that are not classroom teachers, but maybe are coaches, lead teachers, interventionists, facilitator, whatever title you want to call them? How are they going to fit into this? And then recently it's come, because I'm working on a special project right now that ties back to when I did my doctoral program, about cultural exchange and international cultural exchange teachers. We have 4 companies that are operating in the state right now, with a 5th that's submitted a proposal that I think that Dr. Tomberlin and Dr. Seiberg and that group have been working on. And that was kind of in the works for the last several months. I don't know that they've been approved, but cultural exchange, and while it meets some staffing needs for school districts, the purpose behind cultural exchange for those companies is not a staffing program, but salaries matter for those teachers that are uprooting themselves from their home country and coming here. So the nebulous side of that is a concern for me. And then the third thing there is, what about our student services personnel, and how are they going to fit? Your counselors, your social workers, your media coordinators, speech language, all of those people, all of those groups of employees that are paid off of foundationally a teacher salary schedule. And in one of our more recent meetings, it was said, and I don't know by whom, but it was said in one of those meetings that they weren't necessarily part of this. This was specific to classroom teachers. So I think we've got to answer those questions as well.
Thank you, Dr. Holland. We'll get some clarity there. My understanding, well, Dr. Tomberlin, I see your hand raised before I respond. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Graham. That was me that said that, Dr. Holland. So, and the reason is because this is focused on classroom teachers, and the Superintendent's Polaris Project contemplates revisions to not licensure, but compensation and career pathways for other key educator groups, such as instructional support and administrators in subsequent work. There's no way we could do this all at the same time. And it was agreed that we would start with teachers as being the biggest group and then work our way up from there.
Good morning, guys. This is Bill Griffin, Caldwell County Schools. I'd like to reiterate some of the things that my colleagues are stating. That's been some of the feedback that I've received as well. When we just passed our $13 an hour for our classified staff members and then moving to $15 an hour, those collapsed salary schedules really caused a lot of feedback within our district, and I know neighboring districts as well. So I think it would benefit all of us if we would, if we can iron out some of these questions as we move forward, so that when that time comes, we're able to provide answers to each of our staff members. Also, I've got a lot of feedback and questions about defining the teacher effectiveness, what an effective teacher is. Principals have kind of chimed in on that and are concerned. We've also got a lot of feedback from administrators looking at these advanced teacher roles. and the salary that they have, and knowing that we have assistant principals and some principals that are not at that part of the salary structure. So they're concerned that a 10-month employee will be, very close to what they make as an administrator. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Griffin. And thank you, Dr. Tomberlin, for your response earlier. I couldn't get off mute in time. But Dr. Griffin, your points are documented, well noted here. Other immediate reactions and thoughts?
Hello, this is Shonda Cherry, Hertford County Schools.
Good morning, Ms. Cherry.
Just a couple of concerns, not sure how it is addressed. Just wondering, what would this model look like in a district with a lot of beginning teachers or alternatively licensed teachers? Will we get enough teachers on the other end of the scale to mentor and do what's expected in this model? That's one of the concerns for us. And also just reiterating a few of the concerns from my colleagues regarding this placing teacher on the scale in relation to almost against administrators, pressuring them to get certain scores to earn a certain pay grade, as well as having teachers in the building making more or the same as administrators.
Thank you. I heard another voice at the same time with Ms. Cherry. Yes, thank you.
Just all important points, and I think Marcy's point about clarity is we're at a point where we just need to be more specific, I think, to get people on board and start getting into, writing out the details and really grappling with some of those details and answering and being really candid about, master's pay keeps coming up. And I think the conversation about if master's degree is going to make you a better teacher, it's going to be a qualifier for these roles, right? It's not that you automatically get it, but I think we need to be really candid about that. This does not in any way dismiss the value of getting a master's degree. I have a master's degree and it certainly has helped me in my career, but I don't get paid for it explicitly, right? So being able to communicate in a really fair and meaningful way, I think is going to be important. To a lot of the advanced roles questions, I'm really excited to kind of sneak peek to all of you that we just finalized an advanced teaching roles report looking back at the last 5 years of advanced teaching roles in the state and best practices. A lot of these questions and these fears we have watched schools and districts grapple with for 5 years, and it's really truly scary. When we talk with schools that have advanced roles, more than 80% of the teachers, whether they have the roles or they're benefiting from the roles, just love advanced roles. But when we talk to places where it's not, they're terrified of it because it's the fear of the unknown. So all of your concerns are really valid and very important. And hopefully this advanced roles report will help sort of walk through some of those answers to those questions. Valid questions about principal pay, but principal pay has gone up by about $70 million in the last 4 years. So when we started this work in advanced roles, we had principals who were getting paid less than their teachers, and now that is generally, if not always, not the case anymore. There probably are a few very specific, unique situations, and I'm definitely going to dig into those numbers. But I don't think, even if you count 10 months versus 12 months. And then somebody asked about specials. Advanced roles can absolutely be used for specials, but this schedule isn't for specials teachers, right? So you'll probably see some of those answers in the report, but because the work that we're doing here is about teachers, it doesn't extend to those special teachers, but advanced roles absolutely can be for specialists within the building. Ms. Cherry, your question about what if we have a lot of beginning teachers in the building. There are districts, Halifax County is using advanced teaching roles. There are great teachers in every single building in the school in North Carolina. So we haven't seen that be as much of a problem. And because advanced roles tends to retain teachers, it ends up rather quickly attracting talent to schools and certainly increasing retention. So that becomes even less of a problem over time. So all of these concerns are incredibly important and valid. And I think getting it on paper and doing kind of a Q&A format would be really helpful for the public to at least start to alleviate some of the concerns. So that's a long story, but I will be sending out to all of you the advanced roles report when it goes public next week.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brenda, for that feedback. We look forward to receiving that report. In many ways, the way Dr. Martin kind of opened the conversation by saying he's been in this profession in this state for over 30 years, and we're accustomed to a certain model. And what we're doing now is challenging the very existence that we've known. And that's scary. It's going to be scary, not only for the general public, but, for us as well. We're creating a new. And anytime you design a new, you're going into the unknown. So this is to be expected, if you will. I don't want the fear of the unknown to scare us from pressing forward and trying to offer what we believe would be an informed recommendation.
Sorry, one other point that I forgot to, I'm not sure if I mentioned, but advanced roles is now in 10% of our schools in North Carolina. So we have a lot of, and rural and urban and, a lot of different kinds of schools. So we have more information than we've ever had before. And the question I always ask is the system working now? We can all agree it's not. And so it's going to be scary. No state in the entire country has figured this out. And we could be the bold, brave people to move forward with this. So I think we kind of need to keep it at the front of our brains is this working? Is what we're doing working now? And it's not.
Great. Thank you. I also want to make certain that I call your attention to the chat area as we continue our conversation. Thank you, Dr. Martin, for capturing your questions that you posed earlier. You weren't rambling. We captured you loud and clear, but we appreciate you articulating these in writing, so we've got them documented. I also want to point out that Dr. Ennis points out that some of the educator preparation programs, and I've heard this myself, not seeing themselves or seeing their importance in this model. So as we kind of think through our messaging and as we think through the way we go about working on this in the future, making certain that our educator preparation programs see themselves, because I see them in the model, but we may not be as explicit in our conversation about how they're in the model and the way that they will directly contribute to the model. And I see them contributing in many ways, but we've got to make certain that we're clear in our messaging as we have our conversations moving forward. Dr. Griffin, I see your hand, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I'd also been asked by several persons if will there be a time that all of the subcommittees will come together to, I guess, go over their findings and where we could all collaborate together before making a final decision.
No, that's a great question, Dr. Griffin. I'll tell you, the co-chairs of those subcommittees, we meet, but in terms of having all of the committee members, I'm not certain. So I'm going to look to our DPI colleagues to talk to us about process there.
We could certainly entertain that if that's the will of the subcommittees. I just want to caution that would be a very, very large meeting, and it's sometimes things get a little more difficult when that many people are involved. But we can do whatever the will of the subcommittees is on that.
Thank you, Dr. Tomberlin. Dr. Lambert, I see your hand. Good morning.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to go back. Earlier, there was a comment about, or a question about what this will look like if we have areas with a lot of new teachers. And one of the things as I look at the graphic of our model is I just think about the impact that this will have on classroom teachers. And I'm concerned those teachers, because when you look at the apprentice, we would be asking and I don't know how these are those details, but a teacher would be serving as a co-teacher for 2 years with that apprentice. So the impact and the number of teachers obviously is an unknown, but I think that's something that we need to be looking at. And then when you look in the next levels of licensure with the residency and think about the type of support for that, for those of us that have been working with our public school partners with the residency model, know that that is there's a different type of support that we need to have while they are in the classroom, in a sense, learning to teach as they teach, manage behaviors and so forth, while they are managing their families and taking up to 2 classes if they need to have financial aid to support them in their preparation for that. So, again, it's kind of the impact that I'm seeing from the different models that we have early on. And then when we look at it from an EPP perspective and thinking about in those first 2 areas that I've just mentioned, those are teachers that would not be eligible to host our traditional EPP preparation as a clinical educator host for our clinical interns. And then again, as we move up into the more advanced levels, those teachers that would be, I'll just say, used in other capacities for leadership and so forth, I just have a lot of concerns with the ask for teachers in this. And, and part of me just wonders, have we looked? Do we have, veteran teachers and those that would be participating in this model? And then what happens if we can't support this? So just a lot of questions around there. I'll stop before I start rambling.
No, not rambling at all, Dr. Lambert. I think it kind of accentuates some of the earlier points we've heard about. I think it was Ms. Sherry who made the point about, do we have enough veteran teachers and so forth for new teachers and our entry or residency program teachers. So we've got that. Dr. Tomlin, yes, sir.
So just to address the numbers that Dr. Lambert raised, currently we estimate in our State of the Teaching Profession report, beginning teachers comprise about 16,000 teachers out of our 95,000 plus teacher population. So you're looking at a ratio of more around 5 to 1 teachers that would be identified as being most likely being a licensed 4 teacher or higher. 5 to 1 experienced teachers versus beginning teachers. Now, certainly all those experienced teachers would not be what we call effective necessarily, but about 20% of them might not be categorized as effective. So there is certainly a substantial population of advanced teachers that can support the progress of initially licensed teachers or entry-level teachers. And that is not uniformly distributed across the state. Part of this model, addressing Ms. Cherry's comments, is to create the opportunities for those teachers who are advanced but may not be able to leverage an advanced role in their district. That helps move those teachers to areas where there may be fewer advanced teachers to take those roles with that higher salary differential.
Thank you, Dr. Tomlin. Other responses or other things that you've heard or things that may be a little, I won't say unsettling, but things that you'd like to make certain you raise for our consideration as we think about how we organize our next steps of work?
Dr. Graham, something I'd like to ask is, and if you've covered this, I apologize if I missed it, but I wonder a little bit, is there a way, or I'd like to hear people's feedback. We hear some concerns that we certainly want to look at, but is there a way to collect feedback from the field? And first thing that comes to mind, of course, is some type of some form of survey that I'm trying to think of a way that it could be qualitative to get the true feedback or questions people may have from the field. And it would have to be probably different for our higher ed folks and for the K-12 folks. But what questions are out there, and then what do we need to do, or DPI needs to do, to get kind of the information out? I think a lot of stuff, like a lot of the questions that have been asked, I know Brenda's answered some of them, but how do we get this out to the masses, knowing that unless, EdNC did a good job, but, if they weren't looking at EdNC, or they weren't tuned in to a PEPSC member, or someone on the round table, whatever it may be, I wonder how we can, and I hate to use the word market, but how do we get this out to the masses? And then how do we collect the feedback from that, but being, more than just a do you like it or not? What are your concerns? What do you like? What don't you like? I think there's some of that we need to do even before we start answering some of the questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Fleming. I remember doing the Best NC program back in, I think, early December. I remember making note. There was a suggestion from someone, I can't remember who it was, but, the recommendation was perhaps we need to have some listening sessions where we could have office hours, if you will, virtually or otherwise, where people could listen. So someone mentioned earlier that, ANC ran an article, it was great, but perhaps it was presented without some context. So you're able to provide some context, share the model, and then engage in a listening session, not be defensive, but receive the suggestions, recommendations, input that people have to share. And then we can bring that back and start thinking through, what does it mean? How does it inform our behavior moving forward as a committee? So I love the idea. I think really the pause and getting this type of feedback that we've received as a result of the EdNC article and the feedback from INCACTI, I love this type of stuff. It lets us know that we're listening to the field, if you will.
Yeah, and I wondered, I know Dr. Tomlin, I think, has got his hand up. If we did this in digestible, as we all know, for those of us in the K-12 area, working with DPI, we do a lot of things regionally by state board regions and whatnot. And I wonder a little if there's a way that we do, not that Dr. Tomlin and Dr. Evans, Dr. Seibert, everybody wants to do 8 of these, but is there a way to break that up regionally, and then the IHEs and the EPPs that are within that region, that would kind of be their assigned listening tour stop, if you will? Certainly can be virtual or in person, but I just wonder if that would be a little more, that way you don't have the whole state listening at one time and everybody asking questions. If you did the chat box, you could have a little smaller group regionally. And again, that's just a thought. And Dr. Tomberlin or anybody from DPI for that matter, feel free to shoot holes in that if you want. That's just a little 5-minute errand thought there. But
so this is Tom. I don't want to shoot holes in anything, and I certainly don't. I want to do anything I can to help get the information from the field. It's terribly important how teachers feel about this. When they know what the full story is. I honestly don't know that the three of us, Andrew, Kim, and I, could do a statewide tour, a listening tour. I mean, we would need resources to do that. We can raise this issue with leadership about how we might achieve this, but that to me would be preferable than than just a survey, because I know there are a lot of teachers out there that are responding to what they're hearing secondhand. That's evidence from some of the feedback that we get, some of the comments that we get that are clearly not supported by the presentation. And so I think there's a lot of secondhand information around there, and we would love to be able to communicate this directly to folks. I just don't know capacity-wise how our team could support that without further resources.
Dr. Tumblin, I would suggest that we consider, we've got a nice large committee here, and these committee members span the state of North Carolina. I would, I hate to voluntold people, but I would suggest or recommend that we consider thinking about how we could ask our colleagues on this committee to engage in some of these statewide listening tours, virtually or whatever they may be, by region, and ask these individuals to assist us in this regard.
Dr. Graham, this is Bill Griffin again. I think we would be happy to assist in any way possible. Tom, we can certainly help in listening. I think we just need a little bit more knowledge as the direction of where we are and answering some of these, questions that we at the central office or central services are getting as well. But absolutely, we'd be happy to assist, I think, in any way possible.
Right. So I think that's something that we can certainly go to the drawing board and figure out how to best map it out and come up with a uniform, consistent design across regions. If we use Dr. Fleming's suggestion about the 8 different regions, and I think this is something that's easily doable. It's just a matter of us strategizing and putting it in play. Dr. Holland, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. So we have our spring conference coming up soon for PAIC. There'll be a representative from most likely almost every district there. Mm-hmm. Tom, you're on the agenda, I believe. I've been disconnected a little bit the last few weeks, sorry. But I think that you're on the agenda. If there were some type of protocol during your presentation, and Stephen, you're on the steering committee, and I don't know if Wendy's here, I haven't seen her, and Shauna, you are as well. And I see Dean's on steering. We could certainly, if there were some kind of protocol that we could go through at the conference, that then the district HR reps could possibly take back regionally and do a similar protocol so that there is some consistency in how the message is conveyed. Because I think you're right, the context around the proposal and the way that it's been shared, it hasn't been consistent. And part of what could happen and come out of that would be building the FAQ and expanding upon the FAQ that's been discussed by multiple people as an option. So I think that that might be a good testing ground. Everyone at PAIC would be very receptive to that. And it's the 10th through the 13th. So it's literally, I think, a week from Monday.
Thank you, Dr. Holland. The 10th through the 13th is PAIC, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
All right. Yeah. Dr. Martin, we see your answer.
Thanks, Mr. Graham. I'm learning how to use this tool. I've never raised my hand before. I just usually unmute, so I'm taking the lead from some of my colleagues. Just to follow up from what Marcy said, the PAIC agenda is crafted, and I know there is time there, and we can probably adjust that somewhat as needed. I'm sure. Wendy's on the call here too, but I do like the idea in some way, and I actually think, going back to what Brenda said with the FAQ, I've dropped a lot of questions, in the chat today, and I think if others have questions from this committee, I would say maybe drop them in the chat, because our committee is probably the most knowledgeable about this part of it than anyone else. Bill and myself and Wesley Wood sat in yesterday with Monica Lambert on a roundtable with App State, which we appreciate the partnership we have with our higher ed partners. But there were several HR directors there who've not been privy to the numerous and internal discussions we've had on this committee. So we share out, this is the direction, and they had a lot of questions. I didn't capture them all, but I do think capturing the questions, and some of those are in the feedback that Kim Evans shared with us. So there's some questions there. There's some already here today, and capturing the questions and then responding with an FAQ would be a really good first step, because I think that would put the minds of the folks at ease, and getting feedback not just from the HR folks, but the superintendents and especially the teachers. The teachers ultimately is the group that will be affected by this, and we want to hit the mark. And I think it's, with such an overhaul and change, I think that's the most difficult thing, is trying to get it right the first time. And of course, there'll probably be, as always with any initiative, some errors, but I think gathering the feedback, trying to be responsive to questions, and then after that, I think might be the time for a survey after we've disseminated a quality, well-crafted FAQ that answers as many things as we can. And some things may not be able to be answered. I mean, we don't know yet. But as much as we can, I also think it may help legislators when it comes time to voting on additional funding. That's another piece that, we've heard. And another question I didn't drop in yet is, what is the timeline? We heard, first of all, we were shooting to finish this work by now and present it for short session. Then we kind of paused it. And I think that was a good pause to try to figure out some of the details. I support that. But what is that timeline? When we roll this out in the final form, and if the legislature gets behind it and there's funding, when would we expect the first teachers to be in those advanced teaching roles? I think that would help our teaching force to understand the pace of this and what to expect. And would there be grandfathering in of anyone in the past, so that, there's the potential, I think, in some of this that folks' salaries could be negatively impacted depending on where they're at and what they're making now. Some of those things would just help people to be reassured that, hey, this is a progressive action. Our state is forward thinking. We know, as Brenda said, the system's not been working. We can all get behind that. We're all struggling. But how is this going to be better for all those folks I just mentioned?
Great feedback, Dr. Martin. Dr. Tomberlin, I see your hand.
Thanks, Dr. Graham. So I think there's something really important that DPI folks have worked very hard to constantly reiterate in reference to this model that I feel bears repeating for this group. In no way did we envision this to be the final model. That is clearly stated at the introduction of any of the presentations that we've presented here. We did exactly what Chairman Miller asked us to do, is put together a comprehensive plan that people can understand what the beginning and the end and all the pieces in between look like. There were certain holes in that we had to fill, and we filled them with things that made sense to us, with the expectation this needs to be changed. And it is the work of these subcommittees to change that. It is not the work of DPI to develop this model. And so all these questions about, will this happen, will that happen, those are moot questions until this committee decides, and the other three committees decides what those changes need to be in order to make this model something that you want to put in front of everyone. And as the question of the timeline, yes, we wanted to be done by now. That did not happen. But we also got message from the General Assembly. There have been conversations with the General Assembly around this. They indicated that this was long session work, not short session work. But there has been requests from the General Assembly for folks to work with bill drafting and fiscal research around any kind of model that's going to come out of this from PEPSC. So the work is urgent, and the timeline is the end of the summer to have something nailed down, the model that you subcommittee members want to see. And our full expectation is that is a re-envisioning of this, of what's been put in front of you. This is simply to guide you to allow you to edit rather than to generate from scratch everything. So our idea is that you take out those pieces you don't like, put pieces you do want in there, and create that final model. So, I mean, I think a lot of these conversations with people saying, well, how does this fit? How does that fit? Those are questions that are not, you can't answer them now because this is not the model. This is something for you to work from. This is your starting point to make this what you folks want it to be.
Thanks, Dr. Tomberlin. Any other general thoughts, reactions, input? We're documenting what we're hearing, and thank you all for putting information in the chat. It will help us later circle back and capture that information in written form. So we appreciate your commentary in the chat area.
Yeah, Dr. Graham, Bill Griffin here again. Tom, Stephen, thank you so much for that. I think some of the feedback that we're getting from the field is just people are always fearful of the unknown. They have questions. We're talking about teachers' livelihood and their salary moving forward. And I think that's where a lot of the questions stem from. And if we're able to answer those questions and really support them and help them understand, I think it really helps us moving forward in any document that's presented. And I know this has gone out publicly, and once that happened, our phones kind of lit up with questions about things. So thank you for everybody's work moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Griffin. Any other thoughts, reactions? So a couple of things that I'm hearing, and this is by no means a complete synopsis of our conversation, it's just some points that I've jotted here. In terms of timeline, Dr. Tomberlin has shared with us that end of summer is what we're targeting. So we need to make certain that we are, whatever we design moving forward, that we keep that timeline in mind. What I'm hearing is it would be wise, and I think it's almost, I feel we're obligated to do this if we do this properly, to ensure that we're hearing from the voices from the field, particularly our classroom teachers. They're going to be affected by whatever model we recommend. So by all means, we want to make certain that they have an opportunity to share their thoughts and ideas. So what I'm hearing is the need to try to design as quickly as we can a listening tour. And I've heard from committee members either via chat or some of you verbally and orally said that you'd be willing to help in this regard. So making certain that we are getting out, hearing from the field, and that we're collecting those thoughts, reactions, and comments. We also know that we have PAINT coming up. Thank you, Dr. Holland, for sharing this, April 10th through the 13th. So there's an opportunity there. And I think it's a wise place to engage an audience of folk who are very, very, expert in this space. So it would make sense to, in my mind, for us to engage that audience in conversation. And also a frequently asked questions document that would make sense to try to draft and perhaps make available on a website. I'm not certain whose website at this point, maybe it's DPI, I'm not sure. But I think it would be wise to have a FAQs document that will be an evolving, living document that we would post somewhere so people will have access to it. So these are some things that I'm hearing in addition to other things that will help inform our conversation, like the Advanced Teacher Roles Report that Ms. Berg talked about earlier. So capturing a lot of these pieces as well as capturing what you're saying in the chat area. So open to other ideas, suggestions, comments. Dr. Fleming, is there anything from your vantage point, sir, that you might want to highlight or emphasize or raise at this point of the conversation?
No, I think it's been a great conversation. I made some notes here, and one of the things that I don't know the exact word was said, but I kind of just put communication to stakeholders. And I have to remember in this job that's important too, and certainly with the work we're doing on the committee. And I have struggled a little bit, not on our work. I think we've done some great things. Dr. Tomberlin and everybody at DPI has done a wonderful job, but I just wonder, and after Dr. Tomberlin mentioned, you know, a lot of people are getting this secondhand and it's not correct. And we've all experienced that, not just with this work, but the work we do in general. And I wish there was a way, and I hate using the word wish, but I would like to find a way to get this communicated in a way that is accurate. And I agree. Our friends at DPI, they don't have enough time in the day or enough staff in the office or staff on payroll, so to speak, to probably do as much as they'd like to. But I don't know if a recorded way would work. Of course, it wouldn't be live if you did that. But I'm really struggling on how we can get the right message out there. This is what it is. Now, what is the feedback, and how do we either explain when folks are confused, or how we fix what a majority of folks feel like may need to be fixed in the proposal. And I'm just struggling over that. But I think communication is key, and we've got to figure out how to get this out. I just think that is urgent.
I agree, Dr. Fleming. Dr. Tomlin, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Graham and Dr. Fleming. That was so. Staff and I have been texting back and forth during this conversation, and so I'd like to propose a possible solution to this problem. Is that we create a video presenting. I must again articulate. I'm a little hesitant presenting this model as the model we're explaining, because I feel that kind of suggests that this is the model, and I'm trying very hard to avoid that. But I do understand getting the feedback so you know how to change that model is important. So with that view in mind, we could develop a recorded presentation of all the tenets of this model, and then allow folks on these subcommittees or other folks, whatever feedback collection we decide on, to collect that feedback from that presentation. So what we want to make sure is everybody sees the same information,
Exactly.
and then collect that and then have folks collect that feedback from that presentation, so that everybody's seeing the same thing, and then we're getting good feedback based on that official presentation of the model.
Exactly. That's exactly. I jotted kind of the framework of what the listening session would look like, Dr. Tomberlin. What you just laid out is exactly what I was thinking. We've done this with the Drive Task Force to some extent, where, you know, the presentation is the same across every session, if you will. So having that recording ensures that there's that level of consistency of message that Dr. Fleming is alluding to. And, you know, you've done a great job, Dr. Tomberlin, as well as Dr. Miller. You all say up front, and there's a slide that clearly says this is not the final model. So I think, you know, making certain that is reiterated at the beginning, throughout, and at the end, with the intent of people understanding that the whole purpose of the listening session is to inform the final model. So I think if we do it that way, and then the committee members here could just facilitate the conversation at that point. We hear the consistent message, and now we want to get feedback. And as we've done this morning, in many ways, modeling what we would expect during a listening session, share with us your concerns, share with us your thoughts, share with us your recommendations, and what insights you might have, so that we can make certain we send this back to this committee so we can do our work, and we're informed by that input. So we're accounting for whatever people's thoughts might be. But to me, that is the listening session. It's you know, there's no need to overly complicate it. I think it's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a good plan, if you will.
So our homework then is to figure out how to design these listening sessions with the video that Dr. Tomberlin has alluded to, and do so in a way where we can do this quickly but genuinely. You know, the last thing I want to do is have a listening session and pretend to listen. I don't want to do the illusion of inclusion. That's not what I'm after here. I really want us to be able to get and gather feedback from individuals and then come back as a committee and have time to really digest what we've heard so that we can think about it as it informs the work of this subcommittee, keeping in mind that we have to move expeditiously to hit the end of summer timeline date. So a lot to do in a short period of time, but I have faith in the folks on this call and our colleagues at DPI that we can structure this, design it, and get it done effectively in the time period that we've been allotted. So
it may be good, Dr. Grimm, too, just, and I don't, like you, I don't want to volunteer folks either, but it may be where we have some folks from our subcommittee, and also, I shouldn't really even say our subcommittee, but from all the subcommittees, if there are individuals, and I don't know if we can communicate that to the other subcommittee chairs, but, you know, I'll use the word host in quotes, even though, you know, it's probably going to be more virtual. But if there's someone, if we do this regionally with this video or however the format is, are for folks that are kind of in the know, which would be us and our subcommittees, to maybe be a host or a virtual host for that area. That may be good. Not that they have all the answers, because I can promise you I certainly don't, but that they would be able to maybe document some questions or try to answer some of the easier questions, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea, Dr. Fleming. I think Ms. Cherry actually put something similar in the chat area, and I think it would be wise to have that cross-pollination, if you will, so other subcommittee members are able to hear and receive some of the same feedback that we will receive as a subcommittee that could inform the work that they're doing, as well as keep them informed with the work we're doing. So I think that's a wise approach.
Absolutely. That great minds alike. I think alike. I just noticed that. So
great.
I appreciate her doing that. That's great.
Any other thoughts, comments, suggestions? I certainly don't want to belabor the point, but I do want to make certain that we are hearing from you and that you have an opportunity to share your thoughts and ideas so that we can capture them. And of course, we want to make certain that we are putting information in the chat. Brenda did ask the question, Dr. Holland, where is the paint conference this year?
It's in Wrightsville, where we always hold our spring conference at the Holiday Inn. I don't know if it's the Sun Spring anymore, but it's on Wrightsville Beach.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, feedback, suggestions, recommendations? Dr. Tomberlin, Dr. Cyber, Dr. Evans, anything from you all from the DPI perspective?
One question that I wanted to address that Dr. Martin brought up that I forgot about was the hold harmless aspect of this was factored into all of this committee's conversations. So we recognized very early on in this subcommittee that a hold harmless provision was necessary. And we even modeled that out based on the distribution, how many teachers would be affected negatively by this. And we accounted for that in the model and in our estimates of the cost. They really didn't add additional cost because it's funds that's already being supplied by the state. But anyway, that issue was addressed early on in our conversations. I do recall.
You're correct, Dr. Tomberlin. I do think that's one of those misconceptions that has emerged as a result of this work where people are not clear that we have accounted for it. So I think as we think about that video moving forward, that's one of those talking points that we want to make certain that we raise and reiterate and emphasize so people understand that we have accounted for it in the model. other points? Dr. Fleming, anything you'd like to add, sir? I don't want to kind of keep us meeting here if there's no need to add any additional value to the conversation, but I certainly
No, yeah, I agree. Thank you, everybody. This has been very engaging, and I've tried to be as very engaged as well. And I just, I think we're doing some good things. And like I said, we'll get the word out. And I do appreciate everybody's time this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. Dr. Evans, anything that we need to cover that we have not covered this morning?
No, I don't believe so. Everyone just be on the lookout for the second committee date, subcommittee meeting date. That will be coming soon.
Thank you, Dr. Evans, and colleagues. Once again, we thank you for joining us this morning. Very, very good conversation. I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your forthrightness. I appreciate your willingness to share what you've heard. All of this information is important as we structure the next steps of this work. And I certainly appreciate your concrete recommendations of things that we can consider doing. And the work that this committee does is going to be made better because of your engagement and your leadership. So we, Dr. Fleming and I, certainly appreciate your sustained engagement and your sustained commitment to excellence. So looking forward to the next couple of months of this work. We know we have a heavy lift ahead of us. We knew that starting this work over a year ago now, but I'm excited. And I think it was Brenda who said this. We get a chance to create. You know, we're architectural designers, if you will. And I get excited by the notion of creating anew. And, there are going to be some bumps, but this is going to be fun. That already has been fun. So I'm looking forward to it. With that said, if there are no other comments or any other pieces that we need to add to this discussion, we will adjourn this meeting this morning at 11:06 a.m. And Dr. Evans always makes me do this formally. All those in favor of adjourning, or excuse me, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and probably seconded that we adjourn this meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, we say bye. You all have a good day.
Take care. Thank you.